Hey guys, tonight we venture somewhere between stone columns and feather-stuffed pillows, into the surprisingly sleepy world of ancient Roman politics. Don't worry, there won't be any real action, just long, slow scenes of togas folding themselves, candlelight flickering over scrolls you won't read, and the sound of a senator breathing through one nostril while pondering whether dreams come from the gods or from last night's garum sauce. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and local time in the comments so I can map who's drifting off where tonight. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're lying on your back, long before dawn, inside a house that smells faintly of olive oil and wet limestone. Somewhere outside, a fountain murmurs into a basin, and the occasional creak of wood reminds you that even stone houses eventually shift with time. Your name for tonight is irrelevant. What matters is that you're a Roman senator, or will be once the day gets going. For now, you lie in your cubiculum, eyes barely open, wrapped in a thin woolen cloth that never quite covers your feet. No crows, no bells. Your alarm clock is a soft rustling from the kitchen corridor. Your household slaves have already begun their silent procession of daily chores. One passes near your room with a tray of dried figs. Another tends to the morning fire. None speak. You're still drowsy. Sleep clings to you like humidity off the Tiber. A dream lingers, half-formed. A chariot race maybe, or your father scolding you for not memorizing more Virgil. It doesn't matter. You'll forget it by the time your feet touch the cold tile floor. But for now, you stay in bed a little longer. Not out of laziness, but timing. You know the Senate doesn't meet for hours. And showing up too early just means awkward nods and being cornered by that one guy who always brings up Carthage. You pull the linen higher. It smells faintly of lavender, something your wife insisted on. She sleeps in a separate room, of course, like most Roman couples of status. Your marriage is more of a political alliance than a cuddle arrangement. You're grateful for the space. A breeze sneaks through the shuttered window, teasing the flame of an oil lamp. It's still dark outside, but the city is beginning to wake. Somewhere, a rooster crows. You grimace. He's early. The bed isn't soft. Romans thought soft beds were suspicious. Yours is a wooden frame with a mattress stuffed with straw and wool. The kind of thing that gives just enough to stop your spine from staging a protest, but only just. Historians still argue whether Roman senators actually valued this kind of minimalism, or if they were just really bad at carpentry. But either way, you've convinced yourself it builds character. You shift. The mattress creaks. Somewhere in the hallway, a slave coughs, and instantly regrets it. Silence is golden in this house, especially at dawn. You allow yourself one deep sigh. It's not regret, just anticipation. You know today will be long, filled with debates, public appearances, possibly an argument about aqueduct funding. But this moment, this is yours. There's a weird comfort in this liminal hour. Not quite night, not yet day. The air still holds some of the night's chill, and the ceiling above you disappears into shadows. You stare at it anyway. It's painted with scenes from the Aeneid, but you only remember two of them. One has a horse. Eventually, your servant enters. He doesn't knock. He just appears like fog, carrying a clean tunic and a pair of sandals. You nod without speaking. He nods back, equally mute. It's a game you play. How long can you go without a single word? Your record is 2 days. You sit up slowly, feet hitting the floor with a soft slap. You stretch. Something cracks. Not your dignity. You lost that years ago. But probably a vertebra. You notice, with minor irritation, that your toga isn't warmed. That means the heating tile under your dressing bench failed again. You make a mental note to complain. Quietly, passive-aggressively. As you shuffle toward the atrium, a thought hits you. You don't remember falling asleep last night. It just happened. Like a switch was flipped. No counting sheep, no meditation. Just a hard stop after the third goblet of wine and a lecture from your neighbor about grain tariffs. Sleep, for a Roman senator, is not an art. It's a necessity. Something that sneaks up and tackles you. You don't pursue it. It finds you, usually mid-thought, often mid-sentence. There's some dignity in that, you think. Falling asleep while contemplating statecraft. You pretend that makes you noble. You pause in the doorway and look outside. The courtyard is dim, the mosaic tiles damp with dew. A single candle flickers near the altar to your household gods. You nod at them, just in case they're paying attention. You consider crawling back into bed, but no. The city awaits. And besides, the rooster wins again. The morning stretches around you like an old tunic. Familiar, a little scratchy, and slightly uneven at the seams. You shuffle through the atrium on sandaled feet, trailing the faint scent of sleep and last night's spiced wine. Your toga hasn't been folded yet, because that, dear Senator, is a two-man operation requiring patience, precision, and absolutely no sense of urgency. Instead, you slip into your tunica interior, the Roman equivalent of pajamas for grown men with legislative power. It's off-white, mildly rumpled, and held together with a belt that's been chewed at the edge by your neighbor's dog. Yes, the one you secretly loathe but publicly pretend to love, because diplomacy starts at home. You sit on a low bench beside a bronze basin. Your servant pours water over your hands. Not too cold, not too warm, just tepid enough to keep you awake, but not alert. You splash your face with the resigned enthusiasm of someone who knows today's schedule includes 3 speeches, 1 forced laugh at a bad pun about Caesar, and approximately 0 naps. Breakfast arrives, if you can call it that. A dry crust of bread. Maybe a slice of cheese if the gods are feeling generous. A handful of olives stare up at you like they know they're not fooling anyone. Romans didn't believe in indulgent breakfasts. They believed in enduring them. You munch mechanically, already lost in thought. Not deep thought, shallow, bureaucratic thought. Did you remember to bribe that quester? Is today the day your rival proposes that absurd law about regulating wine-to-water ratios in public fountains? Historians still argue whether senators genuinely cared about legislation or just liked hearing their own voices echo through marble halls. You suspect it's both. The echo is satisfying. Your servant holds up 2 togas. One's newer, but slightly stained. The other's pristine, but smells faintly of fish oil. Decisions, decisions. You go with the stained one. It's a power move. Nothing says confidence like visible disregard for appearances. He begins wrapping the fabric around you. It's not a graceful process. You have to hold your arms out like a disgruntled bird while he loops, folds, and tucks with the practiced hands of someone who long ago stopped caring. Togas are ridiculous. 15 feet of fabric for an outfit that limits your ability to walk, eat, and breathe simultaneously. But they are also status. You'd wear a bedsheet covered in bees if it meant keeping your seat in the Senate. Dressed, you step into your sandals and face the door. The world waits. It doesn't care if you're tired. Rome never sleeps. It just naps with one eye open and a dagger tucked under the pillow. You walk through your garden on the way to the street. It's not much. Just a few laurel bushes, a fig tree, and a statue of Minerva that pigeons have claimed as their own. You nod at her anyway. Minerva may be covered in bird droppings, but she's still the goddess of wisdom. As you exit your domus, the sounds of the city begin to build. Metal clanks, hooves clatter, vendors shout things you pretend not to hear. Someone tries to sell you a boiled lark on a stick. You pass. You arrive at the forum earlier than most, which is unfortunate. It means you're now prime target for casual conversations that feel like interrogations. A fellow senator approaches, Lucius something or other. He launches into a monologue about his latest oration on sewer maintenance. You nod at intervals, mentally timing your blinks to appear engaged. He finally pauses to inhale, and you make a break for the Senate House. Inside, it's cool and echoing. The marble floor sends a chill up your spine. The seats are still mostly empty. You take your usual spot, third row, left side, slightly in the shadows. From here, you can appear attentive while dozing behind your hand. The first speaker of the day begins. His voice is nasal. His topic is grain taxes, and his presence is aggressively uninspiring. You feel the urge to nap clawing at you like a stray cat, but you resist, barely. Instead, you adjust your toga and settle into what you call active disinterest. Eyes open, posture straight, mind absolutely elsewhere. You picture a nap, a proper one, on a warm afternoon, under a tree perhaps, maybe with a servant fanning you, and another one reading bad poetry in a low monotone until you drift off. Sleep for a senator is stolen in moments like these, not granted. Between speeches, behind columns, occasionally during particularly long religious processions, when the incense clouds become thick enough to hide your head nodding forward. You glance around. Half the room is in the same state, pretending to care while secretly plotting lunch, revenge, or both. This is politics. This is Rome. Outside, the sun rises higher, but inside, time feels suspended. The Forum is a timeless place where hours can stretch like melted wax. You close your eyes, just briefly. You'll claim contemplation if anyone asks. A minute later, someone shuffles nearby. You reopen your eyes, startled. It's just a messenger. He drops off a scroll. You don't read it. You tuck it under your seat for later. Probably something about a provincial governor doing something scandalous. Again, you adjust your posture. Another speaker takes the floor. You're not sure if it's still about grain. It could be about bridges now, or drainage. It doesn't matter. You're drifting again. Just before your head tips forward, you snap back upright. You clear your throat. No one notices. That's fine. You'd prefer they think you're aloof rather than exhausted. Because being a senator isn't about alertness. It's about endurance. And the secret to surviving the Roman Senate? Strategic micro-napping. The day presses onward like a procession of bored tortoises. Slow, plodding, and somehow louder than you'd expect. You've now been sitting in the Curia Julia for what feels like several lifetimes. The marble beneath you has gone from cool to cold to a subtle form of torture, and your left buttock is trying to defect. The speaker drones on about aqueduct funding. You shift slightly, wincing as the folds of your toga tighten in all the wrong places. Whoever designed this garment had clearly never heard of comfort or naps. You sneak a glance at the sun through the clerestory. Almost noon. Almost time for the best part of any senator's day, the midday escape. The Romans, wise beyond their own pomposity, understood that even power must pause for lunch, and more importantly, for repose. With a dramatic sigh, meant purely for yourself, you rise as the session adjourns. No one claps. No one thanks the speaker. He knows. They all know. This isn't about inspiration. It's about obligation. You walk slowly, not because you're tired, but because haste is undignified, and because the leather strap of your left sandal is unraveling again. Back home, the domus is quiet. A servant greets you with the deadpan efficiency of someone who has spent the morning scrubbing public graffiti off the side wall. You nod solemnly, as if to say, yes, that was heroic. Then you make a beeline for your favorite room in the house, the cubicula, the Roman answer to the modern nap pod. Now, let's clarify something. Roman bedrooms weren't just for night sleep. They were for power recovery. The kind of short, tactical naps that make you feel like a war general rather than a sleepy grandpa. You lie down on the lectus, a narrow, slightly too hard bed that smells faintly of cedar and ego. You kick off your sandals with one lazy flick, wriggle into a more breathable tunic, and allow yourself a sigh that would make a poet weep. The room is darkened with thick curtains. Outside, the midday sun blazes. But inside, you are adrift in your own empire of silence. Sleep doesn't come all at once. It creeps in, the way a Roman cat might sneak into a kitchen, quietly, then entirely. You shift once, then again. Your mind slows. The last thing you hear is the soft clink of pottery from the kitchen, someone preparing your post-nap wine. Historians still argue whether Roman naps were a daily ritual or a luxury reserved for elites. Some claim senators used the time for reading, others for illicit dalliances. You, however, use it for the noble art of not existing for 45 minutes. When you wake, the light in the room has shifted. Your mouth is dry, your hair is slightly flattened, and your tunic has twisted into a personal interpretation of chaos. But you feel improved, not energized exactly, just less dismal. You rise slowly. No one expects speed from a man in a toga. You stretch in the doorway of the cubicula, arms wide, mouth open in a yawn you try to pass off as a deep, philosophical sigh. A passing servant averts his eyes politely. Next comes the light meal, prandium. If breakfast was a culinary insult, lunch is a mild apology. Cold meats, perhaps a boiled egg, some bread, and fruit, if it's in season, and the gods aren't in a mood. You eat with quiet efficiency, seated on a low stool that wobbles slightly. You make a mental note to have it replaced, then immediately forget. After lunch comes another session in the Senate. The idea alone makes you want to crawl back into your cubicula, but duty calls, and nothing in Rome is more relentless than public expectation. Well, maybe the smell of the Tiber in July. You walk slower this time, not out of fatigue, but strategy. The longer your stroll, the shorter the meeting. Along the way, you pass a group of citizens engaged in heated debate. You pause, nodding sagely, pretending to care. In reality, you're trying to remember if you left your scrolls on the floor again. Back in the curia, You take your seat. Another speaker. Another topic. Something about expanding the road to Ostia. You zone out almost immediately, your thoughts returning to that nap. Short, sweet, glorious. You imagine proposing a bill to institutionalize the midday nap. Call it the Lex Dormitoria. Require all senators to recline for 1 hour daily, preferably under the supervision of a bored poet reciting Virgil backwards. It would pass, no question. There's a moment when the speaker mentions your name. Your head jerks upright. Everyone looks at you. You nod vaguely, raise one brow as if weighing a profound thought, and murmur, "Indeed, it works." He continues, "You have dodged yet another accidental policy responsibility. By now, you've perfected the senator's art of appearing busy while doing absolutely nothing. A scroll in hand, a slight frown, a tilted head. These are your tools. Together, they weave the illusion of competence. Outside, shadows lengthen. The air cools. You begin planning your escape route, maybe a visit to the baths, or a stroll past the market for that one vendor who sells those fried honey cakes you pretend not to like. Sleepy senators have their secrets. As the session winds down, you exhale deeply. You've survived another afternoon of listening to men who sound like broken liars. You gather your things, mostly unused, and make your way out. The forum is golden now, drenched in sunset. Statues cast long, dramatic shadows, as if rehearsing for some grand tragedy. You walk among them, one tired soul in a city of posturing stone. And even as the evening comes alive with noise, you carry a secret calm, a nap-shaped calm. Because while others rage against time, you, reclined briefly in victory. The sun dips lower as you shuffle toward the baths, toga gathered slightly to avoid a puddle left by someone who still hasn't understood how drains work. You pass vendors hawking olives and sour wine, their voices rising like seagulls at a gladiator feast, sharp, relentless, and somehow charming in their predictability. You reach the Thermi, Rome's grand bathing complex, with the grace of a man who knows exactly where the best steam sits. These baths aren't just about cleanliness. They're the Roman senator's social network, news channel, spa, and half-hearted gym, all rolled into one slightly mildew-scented package. Inside, the apoditerium, the changing room, is full of old men trying not to look at each other as they disrobe. You nod to a fellow senator, who nods back with the slow solemnity of a man pretending he didn't just drop his undergarment. A slave takes your toga with practiced indifference, and you step barefoot into the warm world of Roman hydrotherapy. First, the tepidarium, warm, humid, the kind of air that makes your lungs feel like they've just been tucked into bed. You sit on a stone bench, letting the heat lull your muscles into softness. You don't speak. No one does. This is a sacred hour, the preamble to real relaxation. A younger man near you starts humming. You shoot him a glare that says, "I've passed laws against that noise." He stops. You close your eyes and lean back. Somewhere nearby, water drips rhythmically, like a metronome for thoughtlessness. Then comes the caldarium, the hot room. And hot it is. You step in and immediately question your life choices. The floor burns. The air is steam mixed with vengeance. You sit down on a slab of marble that probably cooked a chicken earlier and try to breathe in short, shallow puffs. This, you remind yourself, is health. Historians still argue whether the caldarium served more as a purifying chamber or a form of controlled suffering. Some say it mimicked the cleansing fires of Vesta. Others suggest it was just an excuse to gossip while sweating. Either way, your pores have never been more regretful. A servant pours warm olive oil into your hands. You rub it into your skin like a man polishing a statue, then reach for the strigil, a curved metal scraper that somehow both exfoliates and humiliates. You run it down your arms and legs, watching little rivulets of oil and dirt slide away. The guy across from you gives you a nod of approval. It's the Roman male equivalent of a high five. Finally, the frigidarium, the cold plunge. You approach it like a gladiator facing a lion with bad breath. One toe, then another, then full commitment. You drop into the icy water with a gasp loud enough to wake ancestors. Your brain freezes, your lungs revolt, your soul briefly leaves your body and considers a career in Gaul. And then it's over. You emerge, reborn and shivering, hair sticking to your forehead like laurel leaves in distress. A towel is tossed your way. You dry off and wrap yourself in your spare tunic, walking with the slow confidence of a man who has conquered both Senate and scalding steam. You take a moment in the lounge area. Clay cups of diluted wine, figs stuffed with honeyed nuts, and the quiet murmur of post-bath smugness. You overhear a senator bragging about his olive grove. Another complains about his wife's latest marble sculpture. You pretend to listen, but really, you're thinking about your next nap. Outside, dusk is settling over the city like a soft woolen cloak. You make your way home, the stone streets warm underfoot. Along the way, you pass a group of children chasing a goat, laughing like tomorrow doesn't exist. You pause for a moment, smiling. Even Rome has its moments of grace. Back at the Domus, the atrium is dim, lit by oil lamps that flicker like they're trying to start a fire out of boredom. You sit down for cena, the evening meal. Nothing elaborate tonight. A bit of bread, some fish, a handful of olives. You eat slowly, letting the flavors linger. You've earned this. As the meal ends, you retreat once again to the cubicula. The servants have drawn the curtains, and the air inside is scented faintly with lavender and crushed laurel leaves. You lie down, not to sleep yet, but to rest, to float a little above thought. And as you stare at the ceiling, you begin to wonder, what if every part of this day, the meetings, the meals, the baths, were just an elaborate ritual leading up to this moment of stillness? Scholars still debate whether Roman senators truly believed in divine rituals or just went through the motions. But here, now, with your head on a cushion and your legs stretched out, you feel like the day has reached its perfect, drowsy conclusion. A breeze rustles the curtain. Somewhere outside, a dog barks once, then falls silent. You shift, pulling the thin blanket up to your chest. The stone walls glow faintly in lamplight. You close your eyes. You're not fully asleep yet, but you're definitely drifting, somewhere between dreams and digestion. Then comes the moment that makes every senator's evening worthwhile, the first true nap of the night. Not sleep, a nap, an art form in Rome. This isn't some rushed siesta squeezed between errands. This is the post-cena recline, a sanctioned pause in the senator's evening agenda, the kind of nap you melt into with your whole self, toga and all. You're not in bed. You're on a couch, halfway reclined, one arm flung dramatically over your face like a tragic poet. It's not for rest, it's for reflection. You doze, and when you wake, 20, maybe 30 minutes later, it's as if the world has reset itself. The oil lamps seem brighter. Your joints have loosened like old scrolls unrolling. You sit up, yawn like a lion who pays taxes, and begin your evening duties. Because sleep for a Roman senator wasn't a single block. It came in cycles, like debates in the forum. Nap, wake, think, sleep. Wake again. Some historians still argue whether this fragmented rest was cultural or biological. Others say it was simply what the schedule allowed. Regardless, you were never expected to sleep like a baby. You were expected to sleep like a statesman, deliberately, occasionally, and preferably on a slightly uncomfortable couch. You rise, step outside into the courtyard. The peristelium is bathed in moonlight now, casting long shadows beneath the columns. The air smells faintly of night-blooming jasmine and the remnants of someone's overcooked lentils next door. You breathe it in like a philosopher hoping for insight. Here, in this quiet space, you might read, or dictate a letter, or mutter complaints about your cousin's obnoxious mosaic collection. There's no rush. The night is long, and Rome rarely sleeps in a straight line. Eventually, your body reminds you that reclining is only half the job. You return to your cubicula, not entirely eager, but fully resigned. You remove your tunic and fold it carefully, because chaos in fabric invites chaos in dreams, obviously, and slide between linen sheets cooled by the night air. You lie there, not tossing, not turning, just existing. Sleep doesn't arrive with drama. It sidles up like a conspirator at a Senate meeting, whispering, "Ready yet?" You answer with a long exhale. And yet, just as you begin to descend into deeper slumber, the city offers you a gift, a soundscape that somehow lulls and informs all at once. The distant creak of a cart, a chorus of frogs from the Tiber, the faint clink of amphorae being loaded at the docks. Rome, even half asleep, stays busy. You shift your pillow. It's not memory foam. It's probably stuffed with feathers and disappointment. But it's yours. You've broken it in like a good sandal. It fits your head like gossip fits a senator's ear. Perfectly. One foot dangles off of the side of the bed. It feels rebellious in a no one can stop me kind of way. Somewhere, a night slave tiptoes past your door. You pretend not to hear. Dignity requires it. And then, like the soft murmur of Senate proceedings on a rainy afternoon, sleep takes you. This isn't REM. It's not deep or dream-ridden. It's intermission. A soft middle part of the night that lets your mind stretch without fully waking. You don't dream of battle or conquest. You dream of figs. You dream of warm baths. You dream of your dog not chewing on your scrolls for once. Historians still puzzle over Roman sleep hygiene. Did senators go to bed at the same time? Was there protocol for snoring in earthen homes? What happened if someone had night terrors during Saturnalia? The records are unclear, but the vibe, impeccable. Because here's the truth. Roman senators may have been loud in politics, but they were quiet in sleep. They prized rest as much as rhetoric. They knew that a well-rested senator argued better, remembered names better, and didn't fall asleep during temple sacrifices. You, reclining now with the grace of a marble statue on a budget, understand this deeply. The pulse of Rome might be wild and relentless, but your heart, steady, slow, prepping for another cycle, the city, sleeps with one eye open. But tonight, You get to shut both. Morning doesn't arrive in Rome with fanfare. It creeps. You stir before the sun, not because of some alarm or rooster, but because of your internal senator clock, finely tuned from years of cautious routine and scheduled complaining. Your eyes flutter open to the soft crackle of oil lamps being lit outside your door. Somewhere down the atrium, a slave's sandals whisper across marble. A bronze kettle hisses its first breath of steam. You stretch, slowly, carefully, the kind of stretch that acknowledges every joint you've ever abused during a particularly spirited Senate debate. Your shoulders creak like an old warship. Your spine realigns with a noise that would frighten lesser men. But you don't flinch. This is your ritual. Your first stop isn't the latrine, or even the garden. It's the window. You stand, still wrapped in the rumpled linen of sleep, and open the wooden shutters just enough to see the inkling of dawn. It's not golden yet, just pale, like a half-remembered dream. Rome before sunrise is a secret place. The Forum isn't bustling. The markets aren't shouting. Even the cats haven't begun their nocturnal wrap-ups. It's yours, a gift, just for waking early. Now begins the senator's sacred morning rhythm. You don't just stumble into the day. You prepare. You call for warm water. Not hot, warm. Just enough to rinse the night from your face and hands without shocking your delicate Roman constitution. Breakfast is simple. Perhaps a crust of bread dipped in olive oil. A few figs, if the season allows. The point isn't nourishment, it's ceremony. You chew slowly, staring into space like a philosopher contemplating why amphorae never stack right. And while the modern world may prize high-protein starts, you favor contemplation with a side of raisins. Historians still argue whether Roman senators had assigned wake-up times or simply rose with the sun. Some believe there was an informal competition to appear at the Forum first, like ancient flexing. Others think many just woke whenever their bladder politely insisted. Either way, you're up. That's what matters. And now, as the sun begins to wash the sky in watercolor pinks and oranges, you don your tunic, carefully. Not all at once. First the underlayer, cool and coarse. Then the outer tunic, cinched with a modest belt. You glance at your toga praetexta, resting neatly folded on its stand, like a coiled statement. Not yet. That's for showtime. You step outside, into the peristyle garden, where early dew clings to the leaves and the fountain murmurs like it's still dreaming. You walk slowly, letting the chill of dawn chase away any lingering sleep. This is when you think, strategize, judge the birds. Because the truth is, much of a senator's sleep quality hinges on the morning that follows. A rushed start ruins the memory of rest. But this slow unfurling of day, it honors the night before. You whisper a greeting to Janus, god of beginnings, and nod to no one in particular. And here's the odd bit. You're not tired. Despite fragmented sleep, multiple wake-ups, and a midnight detour to refluff your pillow with one hand while scratching your foot with the other, you feel whole, centered. Not energetic exactly, but capable. Some scholars suggest this rhythm, wake, nap, rise, rest again, helped Romans survive long hours of debate and bureaucracy. Others argue it was simply born from candle economies and noisy neighbors. Either way, it worked. You lift your arms over your head. Stretch again. Let the cool air slice under your sleeves. Somewhere, a pigeon lands near the bathhouse roof and eyes you like it knows your voting record. You nod back, because respect is earned. even among birds. You're ready now, not just to walk into the world, but to own it. And it all started with that first twitch of an eyelid before sunrise. The Roman senator doesn't just live. He schedules, he structures, he paces himself through the dark so that daylight feels like a reward. And you've earned it. You step fully into the light now. Light not just of morning sun, but of expectation. Because while Rome wakes with grace, it also wakes with agendas. Yours, naturally, are printed, well etched, on wax tablets by your secretary, who somehow manages to be more alert than any mortal should be at this hour. Today isn't a debate day, thank the gods, which means your toga can stay folded a little longer, and your posture doesn't have to scream dignitas just yet. Instead, your morning is devoted to something far more sacred, the art of not doing much while looking very busy. And that starts in your study, a room not unlike a monk's cell, but with more scrolls and fewer prayers. You sit at your writing desk, a slab of walnut carved with scenes of Mercury giving side-eye to Jupiter. You dip a stylus into a shallow ink pot. And here begins the next phase of the Roman sleep cycle, the mental defrag. While modern folks might slam espresso and scroll through angry rectangles, you prefer a different rhythm. You sketch a few lines of verse. You annotate an old speech. You pretend to review a land deed from your distant estate in Campania, even though you mostly skim for the funny names of the tenant farmers. This, too, is a kind of rest, a cognitive warm-up. Your body may be upright, but your brain is still reclined, one elbow propped lazily on the armrest of logic. Historians still argue whether this morning reverie was genuine leisure or just politically correct loafing. Was the senator actually working, or just stalling until the wine could be poured? You decide not to decide. You're a pragmatist, after all. Occasionally, someone knocks, lightly. A slave boy brings a note from a colleague across the Tiber. You read it. Something about grain tariffs and a mutual acquaintance's embarrassing new statue. You smirk, but instead of responding, you tuck it into a drawer labeled later, which is Roman for never unless urgent. Then comes the walk. Oh yes, the senator's constitutional. You step into the street, flanked by one, maybe two attendants, enough to look important, but not enough to seem paranoid. The street is waking now. Bread sellers shout prices. Goats appear from mysterious alleyways. The scent of baked olives mingles with whatever passed for soap this century. You walk not for the sake of motion, but for reputation. The morning stroll says, I'm alive, I'm composed. I wear sandals with purpose. Neighbors nod, clients hover, children whisper, mostly because you once tripped on a cobblestone and they've never forgotten. Still, you stride on, because movement clears the mental fog. And in Rome, nothing's more luxurious than clarity. You end your circuit at the baths, not to bathe, not yet, but to hover, maybe chat, maybe judge tunic choices, mostly to observe who's pretending not to notice you. Because power, as always, flows in glances more than laws. You sit by a column and close your eyes. Not to sleep, of course, just to listen, to the splash of water, the murmur of gossip, the occasional groan of someone regretting that third honeyed date from breakfast. Your breath slows, your shoulders loosen. You are, in this moment, between states, awake, but not fully on, alert, but not invested. Some scholars claim Romans mastered the art of wakeful resting, a kind of proto-mindfulness, long before it became a TikTok buzzword. Others argue they were just lazy between Senate sessions. But you believe in intentional idling. And so, with the morning well spent doing almost nothing in the most impressive way possible, you rise once more, not rushed, not sluggish, just measured. You head home. Your stomach growls, gently. Lunch is coming. But first, another stretch. Because when you live by the Senate clock, every pause is a power move. Every breath is part of the ritual. And besides, you're conserving energy. Because the best part of being a Roman senator, the nap is coming. Back inside your domus, the sunlight now filters through the impluvium in soft streaks, painting golden lines on the marble floor. You stretch, not dramatically, but just enough to let your joints whisper, "We're not young, but we still serve." The house smells faintly of warm oil, and something your cook insists is lentil stew, but always ends up containing surprise raisins. You wave it off. That's an afternoon problem, because now, my friend, it is the hour of hours, the time the modern world scoffs at, but the ancients revered. You walk toward the triclinium, but you don't sit, not yet. You're delaying gratification, like a philosopher in a toga-branded snuggie. This, you know, is the sacred window before the midday prandium, a light lunch. But more importantly, it's the ramp leading into Rome's true invention, the early afternoon nap. You wander through the peristyle garden again, letting the shaded colonnade reset your internal rhythm. The little fountains murmur like lazy philosophers. A pigeon preens itself on a terracotta ledge, utterly unbothered by the affairs of the Republic. It's a vibe, honestly. You slip into your sleeping chamber, not your main bedroom, mind you. No, this is the cubicula diurna, the day bedroom. Smaller, darker, cooler. The kind of space that says, you're allowed to drift just a bit. The bed is short, intentionally, because it's not for deep sleep. It's for hovering, that floaty mental space where thoughts melt like wax figures in the forum sun. You loosen your tunic, just slightly, and recline. Not flat, just Roman. At an angle that suggests you could leap into action if the Gauls attacked, but only if someone else didn't get there first. Here, in this half-lit den, you close your eyes. The hum of midday life seeps through the shutters, the clatter of hooves, the bark of a dog, a merchant yelling about figs. But it all feels far away, like someone else's dream. Historians still argue whether Roman naps were habitual or luxury. Was it every senator's right, or just the indulgence of the elite? You choose not to answer. You're busy not being busy. Some say Julius Caesar napped between war councils. Others believe Cicero did his best thinking horizontally. You believe both. You also believe that no great oratory was ever written without a solid 20 minutes of drooling on a linen pillow. Outside, your household softens its pace. Slaves speak in hushed tones. No visitors dare knock. Your secretary hovers near the atrium, guarding your slumber like it's a state secret, which honestly, it kind of is. You drift, finally. Not into full unconsciousness, but that sweet twilight zone of rest, where toga debates mix with wine prices and temple construction updates in a strange, sleepy cocktail. Your brain files things it pretended to care about this morning. Your limbs forget they exist. A breeze sneaks through the window slats, cool and kind. It lifts the edge of your tunic like a blessing. The nap deepens, and then, just as gently, the moment ebbs. You stir. Not because of noise, but because of rhythm. Like a tide returning, You blink, and Rome feels less harsh. The sun is past its peak. The light has softened. And you are reborn. This is no exaggeration. Ask any senator, and they'll tell you. Post-nap is the best version of themselves. Calmer, sharper, slightly better at remembering the names of distant relatives who own vineyards. You rise, and there is no shame in the crease on your cheek or the vague impression of a mosaic pattern on your forearm. These are the marks of a man who knows how to rest with intent. You adjust your tunic, splash your face with rose water, and sip a cup of barely sweetened wine. It's not indulgence, it's restoration. Necessary maintenance for the engine of empire. This nap wasn't just sleep, it was strategy. You emerge from your day nap temple with the grace of someone who knows their ancestors invented plumbing. Your sandals tap softly across the mosaic tiles as you move toward the tablinum, where your personal attendant already lays out a scroll or two. Nothing urgent, just enough to feign productivity. The mid-afternoon air in Rome is thick with olive oil and ambition. Merchants still hawk their wares, but with less desperation. Everything slows down just enough for you to appreciate the acoustics of a passing cart, or the particularly aggressive chirp of a cicada on your garden wall. You take a seat, not in the formal sense, but with that Roman half-perch, elbow propped, hand supporting chin, an expression that says, "I'm thinking, but not so hard that I'll sweat." This is your reflective time. Many senators claim this as their intellectual peak. Pliny the Elder would reportedly mutter into scrolls at this hour. Seneca favored deep moral treatises. You, however, debate the merits of imported Egyptian cotton versus good Roman linen. Vital stuff. A servant refills your wine cup, not too much, not too cold, and you let the thought drift. How did Rome conquer the known world and still fail to invent iced tea? Historians still argue whether these afternoons were truly meant for governance, or just elaborate excuses to delay actual work. One school claims the post-nap hour was ideal for private audience sessions, philosophical tutoring, or drafting pointed letters to provincial governors. Another school insists it was when most senators perfected the art of pretending to work while watching birds. Your own calendar remains suspiciously flexible. There's a meeting scheduled with a marble supplier who insists on telling you about every vein in his slabs. But right now, the only thing veining is the sun through your lararium, the household shrine, casting dappled light onto the floor like a private divine disco. You watch it dance. Then you blink slower. It's not laziness, it's political economy of effort. The toga, still wrapped around your shoulders like a heavy question mark, itches only slightly. You adjust. You do not fuss. A senator fusses for no one. Instead, you run a finger along the folds and think about the things you won't get to today. That one tedious cousin's wedding. That grain report from Sicily. That very insistent letter from your wife's sister about her third marriage. Ah well. Tomorrow is another day in the calendar of empire. A messenger arrives, dust on his sandals, scroll in hand. He bows. You wave him forward, but take your time breaking the seal, not out of disinterest, but to establish tempo. You're a maestro, and even your pauses are symphonic. Inside, a notice from another senator, an invitation really, a request for your presence at a late-day convivium, dinner and discussion, the kind that starts civilized and ends with somebody debating Plato while trying not to vomit garum sauce into a potted fig tree. You nod. That'll do. You scribble a non-committal acceptance, then stare out the window. The sun has started its descent. The light goes amber, the way it only does in cities built from sun-warmed stone. A dog barks somewhere. A temple bell chimes. This is the runway to evening, the part where Rome starts getting theatrical. Not in the literal sense, though yes, there will be masks and monologues and some drunk patrician claiming to be Jupiter, but in the mood. The whole city shifts its weight, and so do you. You rise, another rinse, another tunic, perhaps less creased, more silk. A quick inspection of the sandals for dust. You're not vain, just practical. Cleanliness might not be next to godliness in Roman theology, but it's at least adjacent to electability. You prepare for dinner not like a man going to eat, but like a statue preparing to be gazed upon. Every fold, every motion deliberate. Romans don't walk, they glide with emphasis. And you, Senator, you are about to glide straight into the next act of your very sleepy, very calculated life. You descend the steps of your domus, just as the shadows begin to stretch long across the cobblestones. The air is cooler now, almost forgiving, and for the first time today, your lungs feel like they're not working overtime. A good omen, you tell yourself, or at least an excuse to loosen your belt a notch. The street bustles quietly, like Rome is putting on its evening jewelry. Oil lamps are being lit by servants with long sticks, their flames flickering against the aging facades of marble and plaster. The sounds of the city shift. A change in key more than volume. Less hammer, more laughter. Less urgency, more theater. Your destination. A fellow senator's home just beyond the Forum. Close enough to walk, far enough to make a fashionably late entrance. The toga drapes better with movement anyway. You pass vendors packing up, children being corralled indoors, and at least one unfortunate goat who somehow wandered into a sculptor's studio. Dinner with the Roman elite is never just dinner. It's diplomacy, theater, ego management, and soft propaganda served between courses. The host greets you with both hands extended and a smile that means, "Please agree with me later in front of everyone." Inside, the triclinium is dimly lit and smells faintly of cumin, honey, roasted nuts, and olive oil that's definitely too expensive. The reclining couches are arranged in a U-shape, and everyone has assumed their spot like it's a stage direction. You take your place near the center, never too far from the host, but not close enough to be seen as scheming. Politics, like fashion, is all about angles. The first course arrives. Boiled eggs, dusted with fish sauce, spiced dormice. Yes, dormice, don't ask. And a salad of mint and vinegar. It's not glamorous, but it's Rome. And you're hungry. A senator to your left launches into a speech about naval taxation. You nod solemnly. The man across from you counters with a quote from Virgil. You raise an eyebrow. Someone brings up the war in Dacia. You take a slow sip of wine and let your silence do the talking. It's all part of the performance. Historians still argue whether these evening gatherings held any real policy value, or were just elaborate excuses to drink and quote poetry badly. Some suggest that entire senatorial alliances were born over roasted boar and fermented fish paste. Others believe the true purpose was to exhaust each other into submission before actual debate resumed the next morning. But you know the truth. It's both. Always both. The main course appears. Roast lamb stuffed with dates and pine nuts, garnished with bay leaves. Conversation slows as chewing begins. The host lifts his cup and offers a toast that sounds profound, but boils down to, "May we all not be stabbed tomorrow." You lift your cup and pretend it's the first time you've heard that one. As the meal continues, you drift slightly, not from boredom, but from contentment. The wine is just strong enough to blur the edges of conversation. The oil lamps flicker in rhythm with your blinking. The senator to your right is now rambling about a dream he had involving Mercury and a very aggressive goose. You nod. That tracks. By dessert, honey cakes, figs, and something suspiciously like jellied fish. You've reclined fully onto your elbow, chin nestled into your palm. Not asleep, but rehearsing the idea of it. This is the Roman version of winding down. One eye half open, one ear tuned just enough to avoid insult. You've mastered it. The subtle nods, the mhms, the well-timed smile when someone tells a joke that involves Saturn and taxation. You don't laugh. You affirm. Like a man who knows senators don't laugh. They allow mirth. Eventually, the group begins to fade. One man excuses himself to see about a mistress. Another mumbles something about early court duties. You, as ever, leave on a high note. A brief compliment to the cook. A vague promise to host next week. A nod to the host that says, "You did well, but I could do better." You step back into the night, now quieter than before. Rome at night is not truly silent. It breathes. In whispers, in sandals against stone, in wind pushing through columns. You exhale and let the wine settle into your bones, like history settling into the folds of a scroll. The walk home is longer, but softer. You take a different route this time, past a temple glowing in torchlight. You pause at a fountain, not to drink, never drink Roman fountain water, but to admire the stillness, the shadow play, the tiny frog that leaps across the ledge like it owns the Senate. Your household is quiet when you return. A servant waits with a damp cloth. You wipe your hands, remove your sandals, shrug off the toga with the care of someone undressing an idea rather than a garment. In your private chamber, the lamp burns low, the couch is ready, the breeze is light, and as you lie down, belly full of politics and dates, you wonder, not for the first time, why everyone thinks being a senator is so stressful. You sleep now, not because the day exhausted you, but because you let it. You stir before dawn, not because of duty, but because of habit. Even in sleep, your body seems tethered to the rhythms of Rome. You open your eyes to the faint outline of your chamber, long shadows stretching across the mosaic floor, the soft rustle of early breezes teasing the linen curtains. The city isn't awake yet, but it's not exactly asleep either. Somewhere, a rooster misjudges the hour. Somewhere else, a cartwheel squeaks against stone, announcing the arrival of fish that will be overpriced by noon. You rise slowly, not because you have to, but because that's what senators do. The myth of self-discipline must be maintained, even when your main accomplishment yesterday was avoiding an argument over aqueduct placement. Your chamber slave enters quietly, bringing warm water and a cloth scented faintly with lavender. You wash without speaking. You dry your face with a towel so fine it could pass for temple drapery. You slide into a simple tunic, not your senatorial garb, not yet. This is your house attire, soft and unassuming. It's the toga's awkward little brother. You move to the garden, a small space, but yours. Olive trees, a few hardy herbs, a stubborn vine that refuses to bloom. You walk its perimeter barefoot, enjoying the pebbles beneath your soles. It's grounding, literally. The birds begin to chatter, and you mentally assign their songs to different Senate members. The loud, repetitive chirper? Definitely Marcius. That tuneful, confident one? Probably Aelia. That screeching one that sounds like it's losing a debate with itself? No comment. A servant appears with a tray. Bread, cheese, figs, and a small cup of watered wine. You pretend it's for nourishment, but it's mostly for show. The real breakfast won't happen until after the salutation, the morning ritual of receiving clients. You sit on a marble bench and rehearse your expressions. Benevolent smile, thoughtful nod, the polite grimace you save for people asking for things they absolutely will not get. Historians still argue whether the morning salutatio was a sincere civic duty or just glorified begging in togas. Some say it maintained the vital web of Roman patronage. Others think it was performative virtue, signaling with better sandals. The clients arrive in trickles, then waves. Some offer tiny gifts, olives, scrolls, occasionally something alive. Others come empty-handed, but full of problems. Their roof collapsed. Their cousin was fined for horse theft. Their neighbor keeps claiming Jupiter told him to move the boundary stone. You nod. You promise to look into it. You assign imaginary importance to imaginary solutions. Occasionally, someone requests a letter of introduction. You always say yes. Whether you write it is another matter. Then comes the real moment of power, dismissing them with dignity. You thank them, you bless them, you wish them a fruitful day. You do not, under any circumstance, invite them to dinner. The sun climbs higher. The smell of bread from the nearby bakery wafts into your courtyard. You allow yourself a second cup of watered wine. You've earned it by surviving the Roman version of an inbox. Your steward approaches, listing the day's appointments. A tribunal appearance you forgot about. A meeting with the Vestal Virgins about temple funding. A speech you're supposed to give in the forum. Something about marble tariffs. You nod through all of it, making mental notes to feign illness if necessary. There's a letter, too, sealed in wax, with a family crest you haven't seen since the last inheritance dispute. You open it carefully. A cousin wants to marry off his daughter, to you. You sip your wine, hard. Marriage in the Roman elite isn't about love, of course. It's about property, reputation, and producing offspring who can inherit both. You've been dodging this particular cousin for years, but the tone of the letter suggests he's not playing anymore. The kind of man who sends a goat as a wedding gift before you agree. You'll need to consult your sister. She has a knack for dismantling matrimonial expectations without appearing rude. It's a superpower. If she weren't family, she'd probably run the Senate by now. You glance at the sundial. Mid-morning, the Senate will convene soon. You rise, stretch your arms, and let your tunic hang loose just a little longer. No reason to jump back into your senatorial skin just yet. A pigeon lands on your garden wall, watching you with that unsettling bird judgment face. You stare back, silently daring it to coo. It doesn't. The bird, like Rome, respects a man who hasn't spoken yet. You finish your bread. The crust is tough. The olives are sharp. The cheese is too salty. But this, you think, is the breakfast of an empire builder, or at least of someone who needs to pretend they're one. As you step back inside, your sandal catches on a loose tile. You stumble, curse under your breath, and pray no servant witnessed it. Dignity, like a toga, is easily wrinkled. You head toward your dressing room. Time to become the version of yourself the city demands. The one who nods wisely, speaks rarely, and never, under any circumstance, lets anyone know he tripped on a floor he owns. You stand still, just long enough to allow your household staff to gather the layers of your public self. The tunic is replaced by a crisp linen one with a crimson stripe, modest, but loud enough to whisper, "Senator." Then the toga. Ah, yes, the toga. That ridiculous, majestic bedsheet of a garment that turns getting dressed into a two-person operation. Your body is pulled and draped and folded like it's being wrapped for display, not utility. The left arm is pinned down. The right arm left slightly mobile, though only enough to gesture vaguely and drop coins into the right hands. The toga isn't for comfort. It's for optics. Comfort, after all, is the enemy of authority. Or, at least that's what every Roman elder seems to believe. You glance down at yourself and feel like a ceremonial pastry, handsome, difficult to eat, and destined for a feast of bureaucracy. You make your way toward the Senate, not alone, of course. A pair of attendants flank you with scrolls and commentary, while two others serve as mobile shade dispensers. Umbrellas weren't dignified, so you settle for awkwardly arranged cloaks. The streets are busier now. Merchants arguing over table space. Poets loudly declaiming verses no one requested. Dogs darting between chariots with an enviable sense of purpose. You pass a temple and give the appropriate nod. Not too pious, not too dismissive. The gods are always watching, but they tend to forgive political ambiguity. Historians still argue whether Roman senators believed in the gods or just feared being seen, not believing. Some claim piety was sincere. Others suggest it was as much a part of the wardrobe as the toga itself, something worn in public and forgotten in private. The Senate building looms ahead, white marble, columns like upright scowls, a doorway wide enough for ambition to squeeze through. You enter and brace for the ritual theater of government. The murmur starts immediately. Who's arrived? Who hasn't? Who looks ill? Who looks suspiciously healthy? You greet your rivals with warm eyes and cold hands. Your allies get the opposite. You take your seat, arranged by seniority, but also by political strategy. You're close enough to power to appear relevant, but not so close you become a target. The sweet spot of Roman politics, visible but not vulnerable. The debate begins. It's about grain tariffs again. It's always about grain. Half the city would riot if bread prices rose, and the other half would riot if taxes funded cheaper bread. You listen, nodding in all the wrong places. You already know how you'll vote, however keeps you in office and out of trouble. Someone tries to speak over someone else. A third senator bangs his staff against the floor, like he's summoning order, or maybe just trying to stay awake. The presiding officer sighs audibly. A pigeon flutters inside, lands on a beam, and immediately poops. Nature's commentary. You notice your foot has fallen asleep. You wiggle it discreetly. You mentally calculate how long until lunch. The hours blur. Speeches stretch like aging scrolls. Someone quotes Cicero badly. Someone else quotes themselves worse. Eventually, mercifully, the session closes. You stand, bow slightly, and exit with dignity. The minute you step outside, you exhale so hard a nearby servant flinches. Back at your domus, the mood is lighter. You trade the toga for something breezier. A slave fans you as you recline on a couch that's pretending not to be a bed. You nibble on honeyed dates. You chew slowly as if flavor is more political than pleasure. Lunch arrives. Roasted dormice. Yes, again, boiled eggs. A soup that smells like garlic's overachieving cousin. You eat just enough to maintain your senatorial silhouette, which is to say, you're full, but look hungry. A friend stops by. You pretend to be surprised. He's really here to gossip, which is the ancient Roman version of investigative journalism. You sip wine and feign disinterest as he details who's having an affair, who's lost a fortune, and who's about to find both out the hard way. You nod, laugh, offer nothing. You've learned the value of being the second person to know something, not the first to say it. Afternoon comes, and with it, that delicious Roman invention, the meridiatio, the nap. You head to your shaded sleeping chamber, the air slightly cooled by wet drapes hung over clay jugs. Your bed is simple: wood, rope, a thin mattress. But it knows your shape well. You lie down not like a man escaping responsibility, but like one meeting it halfway tomorrow. Your limbs relax, one by one, like senators abandoning a failed motion. The sounds of the city soften. There's still work to be done, of course. Correspondence to review, dinner to attend, a cousin's son to pretend to mentor. But for now, there's quiet. There's rest. There's the sweet lie of a midlife nap. This momentary belief that everything can wait, that Rome will still be Rome when you wake. You close your eyes, and for a few minutes, even empire can pause. The nap doesn't last forever, of course. You're not a poet or a retired general. You're a senator, which means leisure is just an intermission between performances. You open your eyes slowly, letting the afternoon light filter through the woven blinds. Everything has that soft, golden haze, like the city's trying to look innocent. You stretch, not like the soldier, but like a cat, fully aware someone's probably watching through a crack in the curtain. Reputation maintenance never naps. You splash your face with cool water from a silver basin and return to your study. A small pile of wax tablets sits on your desk like they're waiting for a confession. Most of the messages are mundane: requests for favors, updates on shipments, complaints that sound more poetic than practical. One is from your brother-in-law, asking again if you'll support his bid for some minor magistracy. You make a note to consider it, which, in Roman terms, means only if it helps me. Another tablet contains a brief report on a recently arrived ambassador from Parthia. He's brought gifts, flattery, and a suspiciously well-tailored tunic. You remind yourself to sit farther away from him at the next gathering. Parthians smile too easily for people with so many horses. You dictate a few polite replies to your scribe, who scribbles furiously while trying to stay ahead of your pacing. You occasionally throw in a joke just to see if he'll dare smirk. He never does. You admire his discipline or fear, maybe both. Soon enough, your steward announces the arrival of dinner guests. You sigh, not because you're not hungry, but because the guests are. And hungry guests mean long meals and longer performances. You change into a dining toga, less formal, still annoying, and glide toward the triclinium, the Roman dining room designed less for practicality and more for reclining while appearing interesting. The room is already humming with pleasantries and barely concealed ambition. There's a senator's cousin, a wealthy equestrian, a priest who smells like cedarwood and guilt, and a poet who was not invited but is somehow always there. The feast begins. Olives, salted fish, stuffed figs. more honey than your pancreas prefers. You sip diluted wine and feign amusement at a joke about the Gauls that wasn't funny even when Gauls were a threat. At some point, the conversation veers toward philosophy, as it always does when the wine flows and the food gets chewy. Someone brings up Epicurus. Someone else quotes Seneca. You wait for your moment, then say something vaguely wise with enough ambiguity to sound profound and harmless. The poet launches into a verse about the tragic beauty of sunset over the Tiber. You nod respectfully while wondering if the Tiber has ever truly looked beautiful, or if poets just lack better metaphors. Historians still argue whether Roman banquets were more about nourishment or networking. Some believe they were deeply social rituals meant to reinforce community. Others claim they were slow-motion performances in ego inflation. You excuse yourself early, citing a headache, which is the Roman equivalent of saying, "I've had enough of your voice." Your guests understand, or pretend to. Back in your chambers, the night air is cooler. A slave lights a few oil lamps, careful not to make the room too bright. You unpin your toga and let it fall with a thud more symbolic than dramatic. Freedom. You glance at your bed, but aren't quite ready for it. Not yet. You step onto the balcony overlooking your garden. The moon hangs low, casting long shadows across the tiled floor. A night breeze carries the faint scent of pine and distant hearth smoke. You sit quietly, absorbing the sound of Rome at night. Less of a roar, more of a rustle. Somewhere nearby, a dog barks. Farther still, the faint ring of laughter from a tavern. It's not chaos, it's chorus. You reflect on the day, not as a man regretting choices, but as one cataloging them. You played your part. You spoke when required, nodded when necessary, and refrained from insult. Mostly. You think about your father, who once told you, the trick to surviving Rome is to be interesting enough to remember, but dull enough to ignore. You smile. You're still here. That means you're doing it right. You rise and head to bed. This time, not the midday nap, but the real thing. The full Roman surrender to sleep. Your slave fluffs the mattress with professional apathy. You lie down. A wool blanket pulled just to your chin. The oil lamp dims. You breathe slowly. You feel your heart ease. The city outside exhales with you. You're not just sleeping, you're recharging. For tomorrow's speeches, tomorrow's glances, tomorrow's subtle wars. And just before the veil of sleep pulls over you, you whisper to yourself, not a prayer, not a curse, but a promise. Don't let Rome notice you too much. The morning begins not with roosters or sunlight, but with footsteps, soft, deliberate, just outside your door. A servant delivers a whisper and a tray, figs, flatbread, a drizzle of honey, and watered wine so thin it barely offends the grapes. Breakfast, Roman style, efficient, symbolic, digestible in 2 bites or 10, depending on your schedule, or lack of one. You sit on the edge of your bed, chewing slowly, not out of hunger, but to signal to the universe that you're awake, aware, and ready to be bothered again. There's no alarm clock, but the house itself stirs with coded noises. A splash in the atrium pool, a cough from the hallway, a distant scrape of stylus on wax. Life begins its Roman rhythm, softly, politically, and with a little olive oil. You wash up again. Romans were fond of ritual cleaning, not just because of hygiene, but because it gave them something productive to do while staring at themselves judgmentally. You stare too. Not quite judgment, but calculation. You're not old yet, but you know how quickly distinguished turns into replaceable. Today's tunic is pale, understated, the kind of color that says, "I'm important enough not to shout." You cinch your belt, adjust your brooch, and step into the corridor. Your slave is already listing today's schedule. There's a Senate session, of course. Someone is arguing again about grain imports, or taxes, or maybe the aqueduct's graffiti. Doesn't matter. The arguing is what matters, not the topic. On your way to the forum, you pass merchants setting up stalls. The smell of fresh bread and goat cheese wafts through the marble streets. A boy runs past with a chicken under one arm and mischief in both eyes. You wonder briefly if he's happier than you. Then you remember, he doesn't get a nap. The Senate Hall is as you left it, cold, grand, and echo-prone. You take your seat among equals who don't really feel equal. A man with too much perfume gives an impassioned speech about public fountains. Another one counters with statistics that may or may not be real. You nod occasionally, furrow your brow twice, and sigh once at the appropriate moment. Historians still argue whether the Roman Senate was a functioning government or just the world's most well-dressed argument club. You suspect the answer is both. During a break, you wander the portico, catching pieces of conversation like fish in a net. Someone's wife has run off. Someone else's cousin is caught in a bribery scandal. A poet is being tried for sedition. Again. You mentally file these away for later. Information is currency, and your purse is never empty. By early afternoon, your stomach growls again, though not out of hunger. It's the rhythm. Romans didn't eat for calories. They ate to reset the clock. You return home and eat a small lunch in the garden. Bread, olives, a bite of cheese. Simple, balanced, unremarkable. Like a good senator. Then comes the moment you've been waiting for. Riposo, the sanctioned siesta. You recline on your daybed, pull a thin linen cover over your body, and close your eyes. The world doesn't stop, but it slows. The house quiets. The birds hush. Even your thoughts start to whisper. It's in this second nap, this bonus sleep, this midday reward, that the real magic happens. Not dreams exactly, but half-thoughts. Plans that flirt with boldness, but never quite propose. You drift, then rise. No fanfare, no ceremony. The nap ends when your body decides, not your calendar. You feel reorganized, slightly more competent than before. Evening creeps in, and with it, another round of visitors. You don't host tonight, thank the gods, but you do attend a private dinner at a colleague's villa. The same games play out. Too much wine, too little honesty, and laughter that's 60% politeness. This time, you do stay for the dessert. Honey cakes, dates, and a slice of something possibly illegal in Gaul. You smile, compliment the cook, and prepare your exit. Back home, the stars have scattered themselves generously across the sky. You slip out of your toga and into something softer, cotton maybe, something not designed to impress. You lie back in bed, hands folded over your chest, like a statue too tired to pray. The air smells faintly of rosemary and old books. A breeze nudges the curtain like a shy guest. And there it is again, the silence. The same one that filled the garden, the portico, and the Senate halls. Not emptiness, just pause. You close your eyes, aware that this is not the last sleep of your life, but maybe the best one of your day. You've played the part, survived the forum, dodged the gossip, and avoided disaster. That's a Roman victory. And tomorrow, another play, another nap, another tray of figs. But for now, sleep. You wake just before dawn, not because anyone wakes you, but because the house itself begins to exhale. Stone cools, birds stretch their voices, and a light pink smudges the ceiling. You blink against the dimness and let your feet find the floor, one after the other, like old friends reconvening after a long absence. Your joints complain politely, not loud enough to ruin the morning, just enough to remind you, power, like bones, stiffens with age. Outside your chamber, the world is already rebuilding itself. Slaves sweep mosaic floors. The cook pokes embers back to life. Somewhere, the household cat decides today is not the day for catching mice. You, meanwhile, shuffle toward the atrium pool and splash water on your face. Not cold, but brisk enough to wake the ambition. You slip into a morning tunic, pale, modest, senatorial beige. No need to announce anything. In Rome, the loudest man is rarely the one in charge. This morning, there is no Senate session, no meeting, no banquet. You're free to choose your schedule, or rather, to disguise errands as leisure. A walk to the temple, very pious. A stroll through the book market, clearly a sign of intellectual depth. A quiet hour in your library, now that's real power. You take the third option. Your library is not vast, but it's curated. Scrolls aligned like soldiers, wax tablets stacked with quiet defiance. You run your finger along the edge of one shelf. Cicero, it says. You pause at another. Dreams. You smile. You recline on the divan, letting the morning light fall across the floor in obedient stripes. You read. Not deeply, not urgently. You let the words drift past, hoping one will catch like a net on your thoughts. Something about stoicism, something about time. Historians still argue whether Roman senators were truly philosophical, or just like the appearance of being so. But right now, you believe in the fiction. A slave appears with honeyed wine and a fig. You nod. He vanishes. Not a word exchanged. He knows. You know. Rome runs on this silent choreography. By midday, you've written a letter to a friend in Sicily, read 2 passages from Livy, and managed to feign interest in your cousin's complaints about marble imports. It's been a productive day. The sun stands tall now. You feel the tug of gravity behind your eyes. The nap calls, not with urgency, but with inevitability. This one is brief, tighter, more of a reset than a rest. You emerge from it less dreamy and more determined. You visit a bathhouse in the late afternoon, not for hygiene, but for ritual. The steam wraps around you like gossip. Men argue about horses in theater. One claims he's met a Vestal virgin. Another swears the emperor himself winked at him last festival. You soak, nod, and contribute a vague anecdote about a senator's dog that knew Latin. Back home, you eat alone. Simple fare. Lentils, bread, a little fish. Your steward offers wine. You decline. Tomorrow's a Senate session. One must appear unrumpled. You walk the perimeter of your garden before bed. The moon, full and smug, casts everything in soft charcoal. Statues look less heroic by moonlight, more like ghosts dressed for a masquerade. You like them better this way. A breeze catches your sleeve and pulls gently, one last invitation to linger. But the bed waits. Inside, the oil lamp sputters once and then steadies. You lie down. Familiar linens, familiar ceiling. The last thoughts flicker through your head like shadows on a fresco. Will tomorrow bring crisis or calm? Will Gaius finally shut up about his aqueduct? Does anyone really know what the Emperor is thinking? You smile. You don't need answers now. Your limbs grow heavy, not with dread, but with satisfaction. You've survived another day in Rome, not just with your life, but with your dignity, your naps, and your reputation intact. And that, frankly, is no small feat. You close your eyes, feeling time dissolve like salt in bathwater. No fanfare, no toga, just sleep. And Rome, always Rome, will still be here when you wake. So now, as the stars settle themselves above the tiled roofs of a sleeping Rome, you let your breath lengthen. The air is still, the marble cool beneath your fingertips. The great city exhales with you, slowly, evenly, like a beast finally at rest. The columns of your home fade into soft silhouettes. The buzz of politics, of senatorial schemes, of whose villa is larger or whose dinner had finer olives. None of it matters now. The games are paused. The scrolls are rolled tight. Even ambition sleeps. You shift beneath the linen sheet and feel the day unravel. Threads of conversation, obligation, and quiet victory loosen one by one. The fig on your tongue, the steam of the bath, the whisper of your garden, each lingers like incense, pleasant but fading. In the distance, a fountain gurgles gently, not loud, not urgent, just enough to mark the moment. Even water must rest. Sleep for a Roman senator was both luxury and strategy. But for you, tonight, it's just comfort, earned, welcome, soft as the folds of a well-worn tunic. You float now somewhere between memory and dream, where the Senate always listens, where the wine is always warm, and where the bed always forgives. No footsteps echo in the hall, no servants stir, no law demands your voice. The world is a little quieter, a little older, and a little more forgiving in this hour. So let your eyelids fall, let the marble fade, let the empire spin on without you, just for now, because in this moment, the only thing that matters is rest.